Hi, my name is Katie Matashek, and my favorite movie is Suicide Squad.
My name is Maddie, and my favorite movie is Nightmare on Elm Street.
Hi, my name is Paige McGrath, and my favorite movie is Overcomer.
Hi, my name is Sophie, and my favorite movie is The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. Ponyboy is kind of hot. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Peyton Knudsen, and my favorite movie is Inside Out.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to my podcast, where I ask questions about, I answer questions about, and generally vibe about movies.
Okay, well, if this is working, welcome to my first episode of my movie podcast. So, what is this podcast? What is my plan for this? What am I going to talk about? So, while I could just review movies if I'm so obsessed with them, I don't think I want to, at least fully. I mean, maybe I will, but I kind of have a plan for this, and I want to answer questions that I've always thought about movies and talk about questions about them, and I want to just kind of figure out what makes a movie good. So I've kind of split that into different categories, mostly based on genres, and this one is what makes a movie scary. So yeah. I am a big horror movie fan, if you did not know. I love slashers, especially. They can be really complicated and jumbled with plot points to help carry on a long franchise, but yeah, that stuff doesn't make them good, but I don't know why, I just love them no matter what. I don't care. I think they're just so much fun, and I love their stories, and I love how they try to create another sequel or bring back the killer. It's funny. So in many slashers, they tend to rely on blood and all this weapons and violence, and sure, that's scary, but I feel like that's the cheap way out, like the easy way out. Yeah, that's scary, but there's so many more ways that you can be even more truly scared from movies. So I've kind of written down some elements that I thought made horror movies scary, and I'm going to have an example of a horror movie for each one, and yeah, we're just going to kind of talk about that. So the first little element that I've written down that I think is really scary and makes a movie scary is suspense, and you've probably heard of that before. And for me, when I think of suspenseful movies, and probably for a lot of you too, I think of Jaws. It's pretty popular, you've probably seen it. But why is it known as a suspenseful movie? Well, I think it's really genius at suspense. If you've ever watched it, you feel like you don't want to go swimming or go in a body of water ever again. It's so scary. Why and how does it do that? I think it's about what you can't see. It's knowing something big, mysterious, or dangerous could be there, but you can't see it. Like a giant great white shark. It's the waiting, it's the patience, it's anticipation, because you know when you're watching that movie that some swimmer's gonna go in the ocean and get eaten. You just have to sit there and watch and wait for it to happen, and that is so painful and scary, and oh yeah, it really freaks me out. So yeah, I think that's really scary. Also, obviously, when you think of Jaws, you also think of its soundtrack, because obviously its soundtrack is iconic. And any soundtrack for any movie is able to scare you or to make you feel any emotion, to be honest. But yeah, I think when you think of scary soundtracks, the Jaws one is what you think about. So yeah, I love Jaws, and I think it's a really great suspense category of horror movies, and it really is scary. All right, so another thing that I think makes a movie scary, and a thing that we don't really realize, is imagination, your own mind. So when I think about imagination in movies, I think of Halloween, John Carpenter's Halloween from 1978, the original Michael Myers movie, if you didn't know. But I think Halloween is a prime example of a movie relying on your own thoughts, relying on the audience to kind of conjure up all these horrible things that you're thinking about in your mind. It really kind of depends on you to make it scary, but little known fact, your mind is scarier than any movie or anything that you'll ever see on screen. You could think of something so horrifying and that could never ever be put on screen, but this movie allows you and tries to make you conjure up all these things in your mind, and that's what makes it so scary. So obviously when you're thinking, why am I talking about Halloween? Isn't that a slasher? Isn't that all bloody and crazy? But actually, no, Halloween, if you didn't know, doesn't even have any blood in it, at least the original. And it relies so much on that imagination and all these thematic artistic things, and I feel like people don't realize that. So yeah, so if you didn't know, Halloween revolves around this stalker, Michael Myers, who's like so empty and such an absence of character. He doesn't even speak. He stands still. He's stiff. He just stares. And he wears a plain yet very creepy white mask with these plain features of a man. So what makes that scary? There's so much for the audience to fill in there. The mask is so plain. That's creepy. It's not a clown. It's not some crazy teeth face or anything. It's just the face of a plain old man. But you get to decide what's under there. That's scary. You get to kind of come up with Michael's childhood and what he's thinking under there and what he's doing in his mind and what he wants to do to everyone else. It's really creepy. You don't even see his eyes. It's just blank, pale, emotionless eyes. And that is scary. It's the absence of character that really scares me there. So yeah, there's so much for the audience to fill in the gaps. They kind of leave it up to you, and that's awesome. There's also just so much in Halloween also that I think is just really cool and artistic, like how it's so draped in shadow all the time, all these like lighting things. There's like a scene where you can see the mask of Michael Myers kind of fade in from the darkness, and he just stands there for a while and then goes to attack. It's really cool how they use lighting and darkness in that movie. I felt the need to say that. I also really love the score, the soundtrack, the theme of Halloween. If you haven't heard it, please do. Yeah, so the imagination in your own mind is something that is so scary that no movie could really show that. And it's cool that this movie leaves it up to you. You've probably heard of the phrase also, psychological horror movies. So that psychological horror movies are basically horror movies that twist your mind and kind of freak your thoughts and your mind out. It kind of messes with you, and that is something you can't control, and that's something really scary. Yeah, so I don't know if it counts as a psychological horror movie, but I like to think of Scream as one. So Scream, while it is technically a slasher, it's a meta movie as well. So what's a meta movie? That just means it's a self-aware movie. It knows it's a horror movie. It knows it's a slasher. The characters in it watch Halloween. It knows all this stuff. It's based around all these tropes and crazy things that horror movies can bring and have brought into the world for so long. And it twists everything you know about them. It revolves about this girl named Sydney Prescott, and her town are terrorized by this killer, this masked killer, or killers, who are horror movie geeks and are able to twist your mind about everything. Scream teaches you that what you know, like what I'm telling you and everything I've told you already, that doesn't matter because you're gonna die anyway. And that is scary. It relates to the audience in such a way that no movie has ever and will ever do before, because it's in real life. The characters that are being chased around by a masked killer already know about Michael or Freddy or Jason or Chucky. They're just like us. And there they are, running for their lives. It makes us so vulnerable, and that's scary. I also love the mystery aspect that Scream has. It's kind of, I don't know if you've ever heard of the phrase a whodunit, where you try to find out who the killer is, because the audience doesn't know either. But that also teaches, like, once we find out who the killer or killers are, it's such a surprise, because we would have never expected these characters to do these things. But it also teaches through that it doesn't matter what kind of person you are capable of evil and evil things, and that's really freaky. So Scream just messes you up kind of in all those ways, and that's why I love it. Also, some of you, well, most of you have probably heard of the Conjuring franchise, and that's kind of what I'm going to talk about here, and specifically spirits, ghosts, demons, all that stuff. There's a lot of movies based around them, and I think that is a really scary premise for a movie, just like a haunted house. The thing is, these things are based on real life. Like, the events of The Conjuring, if you didn't know, are based on true stories. And that's crazy that all this stuff can happen, all these, hauntings and possessions. But the thing is, that stuff happens in real life. That could happen to you one day for real. And that's really scary. You can't control that. Ghosts and spirits scare everyone. And when people make a movie about that, that's 10 times more scary. Wow, that can really freak you out. So yeah, it's all these things are coming from something like truly evil, something we are not a part of, all these spirits and ghosts, and they're all things we can't control, like I said. Yeah, that's just really scary. And even like really fictional things like Nightmare on Elm Street or Freddy Krueger, it still keeps me up at night, because Freddy haunts people in their nightmares and attacks them in their nightmares. And the thing is, everyone sleeps. Everyone needs sleep. You can't avoid sleep, so you don't want to go to sleep because you don't want to have a nightmare and have Freddy chase you around. And that's something we can't control. It's about what we can't control and vulnerability like that. Nightmare on Elm Street, though I know it's fiction, still freaks me out and makes me not want to go to sleep. Just saying. So the things we can't control, like spirits and hauntings, I think are really scary. Yeah. There's a lot of other things I still kind of want to talk about. There's a lot of movies that revolve around fear and are built around it, like It, which I guess is from a book originally, but It is about, if you might know, a shape-shifting creature that feeds on fear. And obviously the movie's going to try to scare you, and that's what it wants to do, and that's really creepy. That's really creepy. And clowns, too, obviously. The creature likes to turn into the clown, Pennywise, if you didn't know. And clowns are creepy as well. I never thought so, but other people seem to think so. But there's also things like, what makes a movie bad? I'm talking about all these good things, but what makes a horror movie bad? I already talked about, convoluted timelines and stories and blood and violence and all this. But I also think the majority of horror sequels are really bad. And I get there's some really good ones, but they're always, especially with slashers, just trying to continue the story. Invent all these weird things that weren't in the original. They do so many weird things, and they'd always try to kind of beat out the original. They like to amp up the blood, amp up the kill count, and that kind of makes a movie bad sometimes to me, I think. And eventually, the franchise will create as much sequels as they want, and then a remake will probably happen. And remakes almost are never, ever better than the original, the one they're trying to remake. Can you think of a remake that you think right now is better than the original movie? I mean, sure, maybe it is, or a close tie, but like, I think it's safe to say the majority of original movies are always better than their remakes. There are a few horror sequels that I am a fan of, like the Conjuring sequels, or Halloween from 2018, 40 years later. If you didn't know, there's 13 Halloween movies now, including Halloween Ends, and the one made in 2018 fully erases every single sequel and remake, and all these crazy story timelines and stuff. It kind of erases that from its own timeline now, and is only a sequel from the 40-year-old original movie. And I just talked about how remakes and sequels are almost never good. And for a movie that erases all of that and builds off of only the original, that's really cool. So yeah, I'm not saying sequels are bad, but if you want to make a good sequel, maybe start over. That's a great way to go. So yeah, you're probably really confused with all these things that I'm talking about. Maybe I have no idea what I'm saying, all these things that I think I know, all these phrases. Basically, I'm just trying to spread my love of movies, and I hope you will too. Don't be afraid to let your love for movies show. And yeah, thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.